Chapter 9. Fly and the others were still waiting in the holding area behind the picture window. Fly grew more and more excited as the time for her to bolt out of the starting trap approached. She was well trained and knew just what to expect after the slipper placed her inside. Fly could not be quiet anymore and she began to whine and bark. "Let's go!" "What are they waiting for?" she yelped. A dog named Peachy's Wanna Be a Winner told Fly to stop talking. He was a 59-pound boy, 3 years old, and wore the number 8 jacket, colored yellow and black. "I am so tired of this," he grumbled. "Why are you so tired of this?" Fly asked as she turned her head in the direction of Peachy's voice. "I think this is great." Casey's cozy kitten, a 2-year-old female, piped up. "My legs are probably more sore than yours." "Stop complaining," she shouted. She weighed 55 pounds and donned the green number 4 jacket. "None of us want to race today," she added. Just then another greyhound named Dan's Damned Dynamite joined the conversation. "Be quiet, all of you," he snarled. Dan was a very experienced racer. He was 4 years old and weighed 60 pounds. He wore the red jacket with the number 1 on it. He was favored by the track experts in pretty much all of the races he ever raced. "This is your work," he explained. "The sooner you get to work, the sooner you can go home." The slippers arrived and prepared the greyhounds. Fly was now really starting to gear up. Her slipper hooked her to the lead and straightened her blue jacket with the number 2. He must have caused some static electricity because she felt a shock and had to shake it off. The slipper gave Fly a frustrated look because he had to straighten out her jacket once again. "Do that again, and I'll give you something to shake off," he said with a nasty tone. Fly looked up at him and squinted her eyes. Then he pulled on her lead a little too hard, indicating to her that she had better come with him. Fly felt the fresh air in her lungs. Her heart began to beat faster and faster. Her chest pounded as she anticipated the sound of the trapdoor closing. She began to hum and sing. "I'm a happy hound. I am. Just open the door and watch me go," she howled. Dan heard Fly singing and rolled his eyes and shook his head. The clubhouse crowd began to be quiet as they were looking up from their racing programs to see the parade. Onward to the starting trap. The slippers secured each racer into their slot, as indicated by the numbers on their jackets. Fly and the others were now out of the bettor's sight. The dogs began to whimper and whine, except Fly, who was still singing her song. People in the grandstand began to get up and walk outside to the trackside chain-link fence, where they could get a close-up of the track. They could hear the dogs making noises from inside the trap. One bettor joked, "That's my dog." Another spectator responded, "Bro, you're talking about my hound." "Your dog's a real flea bag," he said, smirking. The track announcer began telling everyone over the loudspeakers that it was post time and the betting booths were closed for that race. As he explained some rules, each lighted number on the large clock by the trap dimmed. Then he counted down the time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, he shouted. A bell sounded, triggering the greyhound's instincts. The trap doors swung open. "Here goes Yankee," the announcer sang out. The greyhound's toenails dug into the sand as they propelled themselves around the track. Their muscular legs pulled their swift and graceful bodies around the corners. Fly could feel the sand between her toes. The muzzle she was wearing hid her excited expression. Her lips were pulled back from her clenched jaw. Her nostrils were wide open. Her chest expanded outward and then inward as she breathed hard to draw in fresh air into her large lungs. Fly soared and appeared as though she was flying around the track. She was well trained in how to use her strong neck to pull her body forward in perfect sync with her long, sturdy legs. Faster and faster she ran, aiming straight for the rail, trying to catch Yankee. Fly was in fourth place as she ran around the turn. She was not aware that she was running dangerously close to the electrified rail. "Here I come to take the lead from all of you," she bragged. "In your dreams, you loser," Dan told her as he flew by her. Fly felt hurt by his remark. She remembered when schoolchildren on field trips were visiting Ted's farm. She could tell that some of the children were not being kind and nice to the other children. But she told herself that she was a professional and would ignore what Dan said. She knew that he was doing this because he was trying to distract her. Then, Dan kicked sand into Fly's face. She blinked the sand away and dug deep into focus and began to gain on him. Her reserve energy kicked in. PG and Casey were right behind. They realized they should not get too close to these two front-runners. And they were both lazy racers. They felt if they leveled up their performance, their trainers would expect more out of them. They liked doing just enough to keep in the race. Casey and PG watched from behind as within seconds Fly and Dan came extremely close to colliding with one another. If Dan dug in harder, Fly was prompted to do the same. The two were like bullets blasted from a shotgun as they took the lead from the other racers. As Fly and Dan reached the straightaway and just short of the finish line, they found themselves neck and nose to nose. The two equally expert athletes soared by the cheering crowd of people gathered at the finish line. There was a flash of light, and the two leaders lost sight of the lure. They were photographed in a photo finish. The two's natural instinct kicked in and they began to put on their brakes. Fly's tail began spinning like a parachute and the nails on her feet pulled up as the pads of her feet started to slide in the sand. The announcer came over the loudspeaker to tell the crowd that it would take a moment or so to determine which dog won and which dog placed second. Everyone held on to their tickets. Finally, the announcement was made: Fly had just squeaked by Dan, in a really close finish. Ted was proud, and the bettors were ecstatic. The two athletes did not share the excitement of the humans. They were being met around the corner of the track by their fellow competitors. "Good running with you, Fly," PG said. "He added you too, Dan." Casey saw the slippers and ran over to be leashed up. They all walked back to the holding area. Minutes later, owners or kennel workers took their dogs back to their trucks for the next set of racers who were waiting impatiently in their steel pens. Hundreds of dollars were placed on a Fly and Dan that day. Fly was the one that proved to be the better of the two. Fly, over time, became a great racer and a real moneymaker for Ted. She had several photo finishes, making her racing stats very favorable. Program phrases said alongside her name read, "Pressed at the wire" or "Took over at the turn." She was labeled a threat throughout the race. It was not unusual to see Fly's name and number regularly ranked at the bottom of the program as favored to win. Fly's performance during her very first race neared her performances through the majority of the races in her career. Although she may have appeared to be a little bossy when she was racing, she was just the opposite on the finish line. Fly walked up to each dog who had raced alongside her, touching their nose to theirs, which was her way of shaking their hands for a great run. She was courteous, conscientious, and polite, unlike some of the others she had raced with, who preferred to grumble and not accept her congeniality. And although the finish line was a favorite destination for Fly, she knew that sometimes it could be a dangerous place. She was fortunate because she became accustomed to avoiding the collisions that would sometimes happen to dogs who finished in the race but would not get out of the way in time. Fly would experience this one day, firsthand.